Clara Weston buried her last chicken at dawn, her frozen fingers clawing through ice-hardened ground, while 7 hungry children watched from the cabin window. 8 months since her husband's grave joined this soil. Now even the animals were giving up on them. That's when she heard the gunshot. Then another. Then a man's scream that cut through the Wyoming winter like a blade. She didn't know it yet, but the dying stranger bleeding in her wheat field would change everything if she could keep him alive long enough. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And if this story moves you, subscribe now, because tomorrow, I've saved something that will break your heart and heal it all at once. Clara's hands were still raw from digging when she heard it. A gunshot. Sharp. Close. She dropped the shovel and turned toward the wheat field, or what was left of it. Samuel had planted that field 3 springs ago, talking about the future like a man who believed he had one. Another shot cracked the frozen air. "Mama!" Josie appeared in the cabin doorway, baby Ruth balanced on her hip. "Mama! What was that? Get inside!" Clara was already moving. "Keep the young ones away from the windows." "But Mama..." "Now, Josephine!" Her oldest daughter's jaw tightened, that stubborn set Clara recognized from her own reflection, but she obeyed. At 14, Josie had learned that arguing with her mother wasted precious time. Clara grabbed Samuel's old rifle from behind the rain barrel. She hadn't fired it since he'd taught her back when teaching her things meant he planned to stick around. The weight felt wrong in her hands. Everything felt wrong these days. She moved toward the wheat field, boots crunching through crusted snow. The morning fog hadn't lifted yet, and she couldn't see more than 30 feet ahead. Then she heard the horse scream. Not a whinny. A scream. The sound an animal makes when it knows it's dying. Clara broke into a run. She found them at the field's edge. A black stallion lay on its side, blood steaming in the cold air, its magnificent body already going still. And beside it, a man. Face down in the snow, expensive coat, fine leather boots, blood spreading beneath him like spilled ink, dark against the white ground. Clara stopped. Her breath came in short clouds. "Mister..." She kept the rifle raised. "Mister, can you hear me?" No answer. She moved closer, kicked his boot. Nothing. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. She knelt beside him, her knees soaking through her threadbare dress. Her fingers found his neck there. A pulse, weak as a newborn kitten, but there. She rolled him over. His face surprised her. Not rough like the drifters who sometimes passed through. Clean-shaven, strong jaw, dark hair with silver at the temples. A face that belonged in a bank or a courtroom, not bleeding out in a widow's frozen wheat field. But it was the wounds that stole her breath. 2 bullet holes, one in his shoulder, one in his side. Both still bleeding. Whoever shot him wanted him dead. They just hadn't finished the job. "Mama!" Clara spun. Sam Jr. stood 20 feet away, his 12-year-old face pale as the snow. "Samuel Weston, I told you to stay inside. Josie said you might need help." His voice cracked, half boy, half man, stuck between. Is he dead?" "Not yet." Clara looked at her son, really looked at him, thin, too thin. They all were. "But he will be if we don't move him." Sam's eyes went to the rifle, then to the dead horse, then to the blood soaking into the ground. "Who shot him?" "Don't know, don't care right now." Clara was already calculating. The man was big, over 6 feet, broad shoulders. She couldn't move him alone. "Help me get him inside." "Inside?" Sam stepped back. "Mama, we don't know who he is. He could be an outlaw, a killer. He could die, Samuel, right here in our field." Clara's voice hardened. "Your father would have helped him." The words hit like a slap. Sam's face crumpled for just a second before he straightened. "What do you need me to do?" It took them nearly an hour to drag the stranger to the cabin. He was heavier than he looked. Dead weight, no, not dead, Clara reminded herself. Not dead yet. Every few minutes, she checked his breath. Still there. Barely. Josie met them at the door, her face a storm of questions she knew better than to ask. Behind her, the younger children crowded Maddie with her serious 10-year-old eyes. 8-year-old Will, trying to peer around his sisters, little Grace clutching her rag doll, and Tommy hiding behind Grace's skirt. Even baby Ruth had stopped fussing, as if she sensed something important was happening. "Clear the table," Clara ordered. "The table?" Josie's voice pitched high. "Mama, we eat there." "Not tonight, we don't. Move." Josie handed Ruth to Maddie and swept their meager breakfast things aside, 3 tin plates, a pot of watered-down oats they'd been stretching for 2 days. The children watched as Clara and Sam hefted the stranger onto the wooden surface. "He's bleeding everywhere," Will said, fascinated rather than afraid. "We'll take Tommy and Grace to the loft, now. But I want to see William." The boy grabbed his younger siblings and herded them toward the ladder. Clara heard their footsteps overhead, then the creak of floorboards as they settled in to eavesdrop. She'd deal with that later. "Josie, get my sewing kit. Maddie, put water on to boil. Sam..." She looked at her eldest son. "There's a saddlebag on that dead horse. Bring it to me." "But Mama, it's not ours." "It belongs to this man. If he lives, we'll give it back. If he doesn't..." She didn't finish. "Go." Sam went. Clara cut away the stranger's shirt. Josie made a small sound when she saw the wounds, the angry red flesh, the dark holes still seeping blood. "Is he gonna die, Mama?" Maddie asked from the stove, her voice steady in that unsettling way of hers. Maddie had been the one to find Samuel after the horse threw him. She'd seen death up close. Too close for a 10-year-old. "Not if I can help it." Clara had nursed her husband's wounds a dozen times. Farming was dangerous work, but she'd never dealt with bullet holes. She thought of the war her father had fought in, the stories he'd told about army doctors who saved men who should have died. "The bullet's still in his side," she said mostly to herself. "The shoulder one went clean through." "What does that mean?" Josie asked. "It means I need to cut him open and find it." Josie went pale. But she didn't run. That's my girl, Clara thought. That's my brave girl. The surgery, if you could call it that, took 2 hours. Clara used her sewing needle sterilized in the fire. She used her steady hands honed by years of mending clothes and patching wounds, and holding on when everything told her to let go. She used what little whiskey Samuel had left behind, pouring it into the wounds while the stranger screamed. He'd woken halfway through. Delirious thrashing, calling out names Clara didn't know. "Alice! Alice, I'm sorry. Hold him down." Clara snapped at Sam. Her son threw himself across the man's legs while Josie pinned his arms. The stranger was strong, even half dead, even burning with fever his body fought. "The papers?" he gasped, eyes wild and unseeing. "Harlan took the papers. He'll come for the ranch. He'll..." "Easy, mister." Clara's voice cut through his panic. "You're safe. Nobody's coming for nothing. You hear me?" His eyes found hers. Blue. Startling blue like a summer sky in the middle of this frozen hell. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm the woman trying to save your life, so hold still." Something in her tone got through to him. He went limp. His jaw clenched against the pain, but he stopped fighting. Clara found the bullet. Small, misshapen, lodged 2 inches deep. She pulled it out with her fingers, felt it slip free with a wet sound that turned Josie's face green. "Mama," Josie breathed. "I think I'm gonna... outside. Now. Sam, take over." Josie fled. Sam moved into position, his young face grim with determination. Clara kept working, cleaning, stitching, bandaging. Her fingers knew what to do even when her mind screamed that this was madness, that she had no business playing doctor, that this man might die anyway. And what then? What then? By nightfall, the stranger's fever had climbed so high, Clara could feel the heat coming off him from a foot away. The children had eaten, if you could call it eating. The last of the oats divided 7 ways. Clara had given her portion to Tommy, who'd been crying about his empty stomach. Now the little ones slept in the loft, curled together for warmth, like a litter of puppies. Maddie had Ruth in her arms, both of them breathing slow and even. Only Sam and Josie remained downstairs, watching Clara tend to the dying man. "We can't afford this, Mama." Josie's voice was flat. "We barely got enough food for ourselves. We can't feed him too." "He's not eating, Josephine. He's unconscious. He will eat, if he lives." Josie's eyes were hard. "And then what? We got 7 mouths to feed already. You buried our last chicken this morning." Clara wrung out the cloth she'd been using to cool the stranger's forehead. Her daughter was right. She hated that her daughter was right. "Your father. Daddy's dead." The words hit the air like stones. "He's been dead 8 months. And every time you say your father would have done this, or your father would have wanted that, you act like he's still making decisions. But he's not. He left us, Mama. He left us with nothing." Josephine Marie Weston. "I ain't saying he wanted to die." Josie's voice cracked, and for a moment the hard shell broke, revealing the frightened child underneath. "I'm saying he did. And now we gotta figure out how to survive without him. That means making hard choices. That means not taking in every stray that shows up bleeding." Clara stood, slowly. She crossed the small cabin and stood in front of her daughter, close enough to see the tears Josie was fighting. "I hear you," Clara said quietly. "I hear every word. And you're not wrong." Josie blinked. "But here's what else is true. We got nothing left. The bank's coming for this house in 3 months. I got no money, no animals, no way to pay. We're going to lose everything your father built no matter what." "Then why?" "Because when you got nothing," Clara said, "you still got your choices. You still got who you decide to be. I ain't gonna let a man die in our wheat field because helping him might cost us. I ain't gonna teach you children that survival means stepping over the wounded." She touched her daughter's cheek. "Your father didn't leave us with nothing, baby girl. He left us with our character, and I intend to keep that." Josie stared at her mother for a long moment. Then she crumbled, falling into Clara's arms, sobbing the way she hadn't let herself sob since the funeral. "I'm scared, Mama. I'm so scared." "I know, baby." Clara held her tight. "I'm scared too." From the table, the stranger groaned. His hand twitched, reaching for something that wasn't there. "Alice," he murmured. "I should have been there. I should have—" Clara and Josie pulled apart. Sam, who'd been quiet through the whole exchange, finally spoke. "Who do you think Alice is?" Clara looked at the stranger, at his fine clothes, his strong face, the silver pocket watch that had fallen from his vest during the surgery. She picked it up, opened it. An inscription inside. "To Nate, with all my love, forever. Alice." "I think," Clara said slowly, "Alice is someone he lost." The stranger's fever raged through the night. Clara stayed by his side, cooling his forehead, dripping water between his cracked lips, listening to his rambling confessions. "The ranch. Harlan wants the ranch. Killed Alice. Killed my baby. Won't let him." She pieced together fragments. A ranch. Someone named Harlan. A wife named Alice who'd died. A baby who'd never lived. And running through it all, a grief so raw it made Clara's own widowhood feel almost bearable. Dawn came gray and cold. Clara had dozed in the chair beside the table, jerking awake every time the stranger's breathing changed. Now morning light crept through the gaps in the walls. Gaps Samuel had meant to fix last spring before the horse threw him before the world ended. She checked the stranger's forehead. Cool. Clara's breath caught. She checked again. The fever had broken. "Mama!" Sam appeared at the loft ladder, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Is he?" "He's gonna live." She didn't know how she knew, but she knew. Something had shifted in the night. Death had come knocking, and this man had chosen not to answer. As if hearing her thoughts, the stranger's eyes opened. That shocking blue again. Clear now, not clouded with fever. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then slowly turned his head toward Clara. Where am I? Weston Homestead. Medicine Bow Valley. How? He tried to sit up, gasped, and fell back. How did I get here? My son and I dragged you half a mile through the snow. Clara's voice was matter-of-fact. You're welcome. A ghost of a smile crossed his face, then vanished as pain clearly hit. The men who shot me. Ain't seen nobody but you. My horse. Dead. I'm sorry. He closed his eyes. Something crossed his face. Grief, guilt, resignation. When he opened them again, they were wet. His name was Solomon. Had him 12 years. I'm sorry, Clara said again, and meant it. The stranger tried to take stock of himself, wincing as he discovered the bandages. You did this, the surgery. Wasn't nobody else. The bullet. Got it out. Cleaned the wound best I could. Whether you keep the arm is up to the Almighty now. He stared at her. Really looked at her the way folks rarely looked at widows in patched dresses with hungry children. You saved my life. Seems like. Why? Clara thought of Josie's words last night. The hard truth of them. The harder truth she had spoken in return. Because I could, she said simply. Because my husband would have done the same. Because my children were watching, and I wanted them to see that doing right ain't about what you get in return. The stranger was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm Nathaniel Dawson. Most folks call me Nate. Clara Weston. Mrs. Weston. You should rest, Mr. Dawson. You lost a lot of blood. Talking can wait. No. His hand caught hers, weak but urgent. There are men looking for me. Dangerous men. If they come here, then we'll deal with them when they come. You don't understand. These men, they killed my wife. They killed my unborn child. They've been trying to take everything I have for 6 years. If they find out you helped me... Mr. Dawson? Clara's voice was steel. I got 7 children in this house. You think I don't know about protecting what's mine? He studied her face. Whatever he saw there made something in his expression shift. 7, he repeated. 7. And your husband. Buried him 8 months back, horse through him. Nate Dawson was quiet. Then, I'm sorry. Clara shrugged. Sorrow was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. Ma'am, Mrs. Weston, I have money, a lot of it. I own Iron Creek Ranch about 30 miles east of here. If you help me get word to my men, you can talk about payment after you can sit up without passing out. Clara stood businesslike. Right now, you need rest and food. We ain't got much, but what we got, we'll share. I can't take food from your children. Too late. You already did. She almost smiled at his stricken expression. Relax, Mr. Dawson. We'll manage. We always do. She moved toward the stove, toward the empty pot, toward another day of figuring out how to feed 8 people with nothing. Behind her, Nate Dawson's voice came soft. Mrs. Weston. Yes. Thank you. She didn't turn around, didn't trust herself to, because somewhere in those 2 words she'd heard something she hadn't heard in 8 months. Hope. And hope was the most dangerous thing of all. The children came down one by one as the morning wore on. Maddie first carrying Ruth, her serious eyes, taking in everything without comment. Then Will, curious and chattering, until a look from Clara silenced him. Grace clutched her rag doll and stared at the stranger from behind the chair. Tommy held Grace's hand and whispered questions she couldn't answer. Last came Josie, her face still red from last night's tears, but her spine straight. Children, Clara said formally. This is Mr. Nathaniel Dawson. He's going to be staying with us while he heals up. For how long? Josie asked. Long as it takes. Where's he gonna sleep? We'll figure it out. Is he a outlaw? Will demanded. Sam said he might be a outlaw. William? Well, he did. He said, I'm not an outlaw, son. Nate's voice was weak but steady. I'm a rancher. A cattle rancher. The men who shot me are the outlaws. Why'd they shoot you? Well, that's enough questions, Clara said. But Nate shook his head slightly. It's all right, ma'am. He has a right to know who's under his roof. He looked at Will with those startling blue eyes. They shot me because I have something they want. My ranch. My land. And I won't give it to them. Will's eyes went wide. Are they gonna come here? The cabin went very quiet. Nate looked at Clara. Something passed between them, an understanding, a warning. I don't know, he said honestly. But if they do, I'll make sure they don't hurt your family. I promise you that. How? Josie's voice was sharp. You can barely sit up. Josie, Clara warned. No, Mama, it's a fair question. Josie stepped forward, arms crossed. This man shows up bleeding, brings trouble with him, eats our food. We ain't got no food, Will pointed out. And now he's making promises he can't keep. Forgive me if I don't believe some shot-up stranger who can't even stand is going to protect us from men who already killed his wife. The silence that followed was absolute. Nate's face had gone pale, not from pain, but from Josie's words. Clara saw him flinch, saw the wound. Those words opened deeper than anything the bullets had done. Josephine Marie, you apologize right now. It's the truth. I don't care if it's the truth. There's a way to speak truth, and that ain't it. Josie's mouth set in a stubborn line. For a long moment, mother and daughter stared at each other. Then Nate spoke. Quiet. Raw. She's right. Both women turned to look at him. I couldn't protect Alice. I was away checking on the far pastures when the fever took her. By the time I got back, his voice broke. He pressed on anyway. By the time I got back, she was gone. Her and the baby both. I buried them under the cottonwood tree she loved. And for 6 years I've been trying to figure out why I survived when they didn't. The cabin was silent. Even Will had stopped fidgeting. Your daughter's right. Nate continued, his eyes on Josie. I can't promise to protect you. I couldn't protect the people I loved most in the world. All I can promise is that I'll try. And that when I'm able, I'll repay every kindness your mother has shown me tenfold. Josie's hard expression wavered. She looked at her mother, then back at Nate. I'm sorry, she said finally. About your wife. And your baby. Nate nodded, accepting the apology. His eyes were wet, but he didn't wipe them. Josie, Clara said gently, take the children outside. See if there's any eggs in the henhouse. Mama, the hens are... Check anyway. Josie gathered her siblings and herded them out. The door closed behind them, leaving Clara alone with the wounded stranger. You didn't have to tell them all that, she said. Yes, I did. Nate's voice was tired but firm. Your daughter needed to know I understood what she was protecting. Her family. Same thing I failed to protect. He met Clara's eyes. She's a good girl. Strong. Like her mother. Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She turned to the stove, to the empty pot, to the question of how to make nothing feed 8 people. Behind her, Nate Dawson was quiet for a long time. Then, Mrs. Weston. Yes. That saddlebag my horse was carrying. You got it. Clara nodded toward the corner. Sam had brought it in last night. There's money in there. Paper money. Coins. Whatever you need, take it. Clara's hand stilled on the stove. I ain't taking your money, Mr. Dawson. Why not? Because I didn't save your life for payment. She turned to face him. And because if those men come looking for you, the last thing I need is to be caught with your money in my pocket. They'll think I'm part of whatever you're running from. Nate's expression shifted. Respect, she thought. maybe surprise. You've thought this through. I've survived 8 months alone with 7 children. Thinking things through is all I do. He was quiet. Then, what if the money isn't payment? What if it's a loan? A loan. You help me get word to my ranch. When my men come for me, I'll pay you back. With interest. Legal-like. A business arrangement. Clara studied him. This man who'd lost everything and still wanted to give. You don't even know if you're going to live through the week. Then you'll have the money either way. A ghost of a smile. Consider it insurance. She should say no. She knew she should say no. But Tommy's ribs were showing through his shirt. Grace had been coughing all week. Ruth needed milk, and they had nothing to give her. All right, Clara heard herself say. Alone. Nate nodded, satisfied. Outside, Clara heard her children's voices, Will arguing with Sam about something, Grace's thin laugh, Josie calling them all to order. She looked at the stranger on her table, at the blood still staining her floorboards, at the complicated, dangerous hope that had arrived in her wheat field like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was praying. 3 months until the bank took the house. A dying man who promised to change everything, and 7 children who needed her to make the right choice. God help me, Clara thought, because I have no idea what I'm doing, but she'd figure it out. She always did. The money changed everything and nothing. Clara took $20 from Nate's saddlebag, enough for flour, salt, and a side of bacon from the general store. She left before dawn, walking the 4 miles to town because they had no horse to spare, returning before the children woke with provisions that made Will's eyes go wide as saucers. Bacon, Mama. He reached for it like it might disappear. Real bacon. Don't touch it with dirty hands. Go wash up. Will scrambled for the water basin. Behind him, Josie stood in the doorway to the back room where they'd moved Nate, her expression unreadable. You took his money. I borrowed it. There's a difference. Is there? Clara set down the supplies, her back aching from the walk. You want your brothers and sisters to eat, or you want to argue about where the food came from? Josie's jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. She turned back to check on Nate, and Clara heard her voice through the thin wall, softer than she'd expected. You need water, Mr. Dawson? Please. And Josie, thank you. Clara allowed herself a small breath. Maybe her daughter was coming around. 3 days passed. Nate's fever stayed down, but his strength returned slowly. Clara changed his bandages twice a day, watching the wounds for signs of infection, finding none. The man had a constitution like iron, she decided, or maybe just too much stubbornness to die. You were a soldier, she said on the 3rd morning, unwrapping the bandage on his shoulder. These ain't your first bullet wounds. That obvious? I can count, Mr. Dawson. You got scars older than my marriage. He was quiet for a moment. Union Army. Captain. Served 3 years before Appomattox. My father fought too. 6th Iowa Infantry. Good men, the Iowa boys. Clara worked in silence, cleaning the wound with water she'd boiled with willow bark. Nate didn't flinch, though she knew it must have burned. The men who shot you, she said carefully. They'll come looking. Yes. When? Soon. Maybe today. Maybe tomorrow. He met her eyes. Victor Harlan doesn't give up easy. He's been trying to take Iron Creek for 6 years, since before Alice. He stopped. Since before Alice died. Nate nodded. He wanted to marry her once, back when her father owned the land. She chose me instead. Victor never forgave either of us. Clara's hands stilled on the bandage. He wanted your wife. Wanted her land. She just came with it far as he was concerned. Bitterness crept into Nate's voice. When she died, he thought I'd sell. A grieving widower, no children. What did I need all that land for? But I couldn't. It was all I had left of her. So he started taking it by force. Bought up the surrounding ranches, cut off my water rights, hired men to run off my cattle. Nate's jaw clenched. I gathered evidence. Every dirty deal, every bribe, every threat. Was taking it to the territorial marshal when his men caught up with me. The papers you were talking about in your fever. Gone. They took them. 6 years of work gone. He looked at her. But I'm still alive. That wasn't part of their plan. Clara finished the bandage and sat back. What happens when they find out you're here? They won't. Mr. Dawson. Nate, please. Nate. The name felt strange in her mouth, too familiar. You can barely stand. How exactly do you plan to keep them from finding you? I'll leave, as soon as I can ride. On what horse? That stopped him. We got one mule, Clara continued flatly. She's 20 years old and half blind. You ain't riding anywhere on Bessie. Then I'll walk. 30 miles in the snow, with 2 bullet holes. I won't put your family at risk. His voice hardened. I've already cost one family everything. I won't do it again. Something in his tone made Clara pause. The guilt there, the weight of it. That wasn't your fault, she said quietly. Alice, the baby. I wasn't there. Would it have made a difference? I don't know. His voice cracked. That's the worst part. I don't know. Clara recognized that particular flavor of grief. She'd tasted it herself, lying awake at night, wondering if she'd missed something, some sign that Samuel's horse was going lame, some reason to keep him home that morning. The night my husband died, she said, I'd asked him to fix the henhouse door. It had been sticking for weeks. He said he'd do it after he checked the back pasture. She looked at her hands. I think about that door every single day. If I'd just let it go. If I'd asked him to do it first. You can't think that way. Neither can you. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. 2 people who understood the specific loneliness of surviving when someone you loved didn't. Mama? Sam's voice shattered the moment. He burst through the door breathless. Riders coming, 3 of them, from the east. Clara was on her feet instantly. How far? Maybe 10 minutes out. I saw them from the ridge. Nate was already trying to rise. Help me up. You can't, Clara. His use of her first name stopped her. Those are Harlan's men. I know how they work. You need to hide me. Now. Clara's mind raced. The root cellar. It was the only place. Sam helped me get him downstairs. Josie. Her daughter appeared, baby Ruth on her hip. The younger children clustered behind her. Root cellar door. Move the rug. Mama, what? Now Josephine. They moved fast. Nate bit back groans as Sam and Clara half carried him across the cabin. The root cellar was cold and dark, barely big enough for a man his size to lie flat among the potato sacks and preserved jars. Don't make a sound, Clara ordered. No matter what you hear. Clara, promise me. I promise. She closed the door. Josie pulled the rug back over it. The children stood frozen, staring at their mother. Listen to me. Clara knelt, pulling them close. There are bad men coming. They might ask about a stranger. You ain't seen nobody. Understand? But Mama, that's lying, Grace whispered, clutching her doll. Sometimes lying protects the people we love. You remember that, Gracie. Some lies are holy. The sound of hoofbeats reached them. Close now. Josie, take the young ones to the loft. Keep Ruth quiet. Mama. Go. Josie went herding her siblings up the ladder with practiced efficiency. Only Sam remained standing beside his mother. You should go too, Clara said. No, ma'am. Samuel. Daddy would have stayed, so I'm staying. Clara looked at her son, 12 years old, trying so hard to be a man. She didn't have time to argue. Then stay behind me. Don't speak unless they ask you direct. A knock at the door. Heavy. Demanding. Clara smoothed her apron, lifted her chin, and opened it. 3 men stood on her porch. The one in front had a scar running from his eyebrow to his jaw, his eyes the color of dirty ice. Behind him, 2 others, younger, meaner hands resting on their gun belts. Afternoon, ma'am. The scarred man touched his hat, but there was no respect in the gesture. Name's Colt Brenner. We're looking for a friend of ours. Ain't many friends passing through this time of year. This one's hard to miss. Tall fellow, dark hair. Might have been bleeding some. Clara kept her face blank. Bleeding? Hunting accident. Brenner smiled, showing yellow teeth. We're real worried about him. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Brenner, but I ain't seen nobody matching that description. We don't get many visitors out here. Brenner's eyes moved past her, scanning the cabin. Awful big place for a woman alone. I ain't alone. I got my son here and 6 more children besides. No husband. Buried him last spring. Shame. Brenner didn't sound like he meant it. Mind if we look around, just to be thorough? Clara felt Sam tense beside her. She put a hand on his arm. Actually, I do mind, Mr. Brenner. I got young children in this house, and I don't allow strange men near them. Brenner's smile faded. Ma'am, I'm trying to be polite here. And I appreciate that, but the answer's still no. Clara stepped forward, filling the doorway. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got supper to prepare. One of the younger men stepped forward. Listen here, woman. Easy pike. Brenner raised a hand. The lady said she ain't seen our friend. I believe her. He turned back to Clara, and something in his eyes made her blood run cold. But if you do happen to see a wounded man wandering around, well, I'd surely appreciate you sending word. There's a reward, $500. Clara's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. I'll keep that in mind. You do that. Brenner touched his hat again. Have a good evening, ma'am. You and your children. The way he said it made Clara's skin crawl. She watched them ride away, standing in the doorway, until they were specks on the horizon. Only then did she close the door and sag against it, her legs suddenly weak. Mama! Sam's voice was shaky. Did we do the right thing? Clara thought about the man hiding under her floor, the danger he'd brought to her door, the money that had put food in her children's bellies. I don't know, baby, she said honestly. But it's done now. She moved to the rug and pulled it back, revealing the root cellar door. When she opened it, Nate Dawson looked up at her from the darkness, his face gray with pain, but his eyes sharp with gratitude. They're gone. For now. He reached up, and Clara helped him climb out Sam, supporting his other side. Once he was settled back in the chair, Nate looked at her for a long moment. You could have turned me in. $500 would solve a lot of problems. It would create more. Most people wouldn't see it that way. I ain't most people, Mr. Dawson. Nate, he corrected again, softer this time. The children came down from the loft, Will bursting with questions, Grace still clutching her doll Tommy hiding behind Maddie. Even Josie looked shaken, though she tried to hide it. Are the bad men gone? Grace whispered. They're gone, baby. Are they coming back? Clara looked at Nate. He met her eyes, and she saw the truth there. Maybe, she said, but we'll be ready if they do. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Clara sat across from Nate in the dim lamplight. His color was better, and he'd managed to sit upright for most of the day, but she could see the exhaustion etched in his face. Tell me about Iron Creek, she said. Why? Because if those men come back, I need to know what I'm protecting. Nate was quiet for a moment. Then he began to talk. He told her about building the ranch from nothing, buying the land with his army pay and his father's small inheritance. About Alice, the rancher's daughter, who'd laughed at his ambitions and then helped him achieve them. About the house they'd built together, the cattle they'd raised, the future they'd planned. We were going to have a big family, he said, his voice rough. Alice wanted at least 6 children. Said the house was too quiet with just the 2 of us. Clara thought of her own noisy cabin. 7 children climbing over each other, fighting for space, demanding attention. It ain't quiet, she said. I can promise you that. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. No, I don't imagine it is. You never remarried. Couldn't. He shook his head. Tried courting once about 2 years after. Nice woman from Laramie, but every time I looked at her, I saw Alice. It wasn't fair to either of us. And now, Nate looked at her, really looked the way he had that first morning when he'd woken to find her face hovering over his. Now I'm sitting in a stranger's cabin eating her food, putting her family in danger, and wondering how I got so far from the man I used to be. You're still that man. Am I? Bitterness crept into his voice. That man would never have brought trouble to a widow's door. That man would have died before he let anyone else get hurt. That man did almost die, Clara pointed out. I found you face down in my wheat field with 2 bullets in you, remember? That's not. And that man is still here, still fighting, still trying to protect people, even when he can barely stand. She leaned forward. I don't know who you were before Nate Dawson, but I know who you are now. You're a man who offered his last dollar to a family that saved his life. That ain't nothing. Nate stared at her. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or hope. You're a remarkable woman, Clara Weston. I'm a tired woman with too many mouths to feed, and not enough hours in the day. But she smiled as she said it. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow you're going to try standing on your own, and you'll need your strength. Yes, ma'am. She rose to check on the children, but his voice stopped her. Clara, she turned. Thank you. For believing I'm still worth something. She didn't know what to say to that. So she just nodded and climbed the ladder to the loft where her children slept in a pile of limbs and blankets, and tried not to think about the way Nate Dawson's eyes had looked in the lamplight. The week that followed changed something in the household. Nate grew stronger. By the 4th day, he could walk across the cabin without help. By the 6th, he was helping Maddie carry water from the well, ignoring Clara's protests that he'd tear his stitches. I ain't about to lie around while your children do all the work, he said firmly. My mama raised me better than that. Will, predictably, was the first to warm to him. The boy followed Nate everywhere, peppering him with questions about ranching, about horses, about the war. Nate answered them all with patient good humor. Did you ever kill anyone? Will asked one afternoon. William. Clara's voice was sharp from the stove. It's all right. Nate set down the piece of wood he'd been whittling. Yes, son, I did. In the war. Was it scary? Very. Do you have bad dreams about it? The cabin went quiet. Even the younger children stopped playing to listen. Sometimes, Nate admitted, some things stay with you whether you want them to or not. Will was quiet for a moment. Then, Daddy had bad dreams too. After the war, he used to wake up yelling. Mama would hold him till he stopped shaking. Clara's throat tightened. She'd never known the children had heard those midnight terrors. Your daddy was a brave man, Nate said softly. The bravest men I knew were the ones who had bad dreams. It meant they hadn't forgotten what they'd seen, hadn't let it turn them hard. Mama says Daddy's watching us from heaven. I'm sure he is. Do you think your wife is watching too? Nate was quiet for a long moment. I hope so. I hope she sees that I'm trying to be the man she married, even when it's hard. That night after the children were asleep, Clara found Nate on the porch staring at the stars. She'd brought him a blanket. The nights were bitter cold, and he shouldn't be outside, but she stopped when she saw the tears on his face. He didn't try to hide them, just wiped his cheek with the back of his hand and said, Your boy asked me something today that I've been asking myself for 6 years. What's that? If Alice is watching. He looked at her. What do you tell yourself about Samuel? Clara sat down beside him, wrapping the blanket around both their shoulders without thinking about what it might mean. I tell myself he'd want me to keep going. That every time I get out of bed, every time I feed the children, every time I don't just give up, I'm honoring him. Does it help? Some days. She paused. Other days, I'm just too tired to think about it at all. Nate laughed, a short, surprised sound. That's the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years. I ain't got the energy for anything else." They sat in silence, watching their breath fog in the cold air. Clara knew she should go inside. Knew this, whatever this was moving toward something she wasn't ready for. But she stayed. "Clara," Nate's voice was low, "when I'm strong enough to ride, I want you to come with me." She stiffened. "What?" "To Iron Creek. You and the children. The ranch house is big, too big for one man. There's room for everyone. School's nearby. Work for Sam when he's old enough. A real future." "We got a future here." "Do you?" He turned to face her. "Clara, I've seen your ledgers. I know the bank is coming for this place. 3 months, maybe less. Where will you go then?" "That ain't your concern. It is now." His hand found hers in the darkness. "You saved my life. Let me save yours." Clara pulled away. "I ain't looking to be saved, Mr. Dawson. I'm looking to survive. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." She stood, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "Being saved means owing someone, depending on someone. I've been dependent before, and when he died, I nearly died with him. I won't do that again." "I'm not asking you to depend on me." "Then what are you asking?" The question hung in the air between them. Nate looked up at her, his expression raw and open in a way that made her heart ache. "I'm asking for a chance, to help you, to be something. I don't know what yet, but something more than a stranger bleeding on your table." Clara felt the tears pressing behind her eyes. She wouldn't let them fall. "You're already more than that," she said quietly. "But I can't make promises I ain't sure I can keep. I got 7 children who depend on me. I can't afford to get this wrong." "I know." "Do you?" "I lost everything once, Clara. My wife, my child, my faith in myself." He stood slowly, wincing at the pull of his wounds. "I won't ask you to risk more than you're willing to give. But I need you to know what I'm offering isn't charity. It isn't pity. It's partnership. Partnership. Equals, working together, building something new from what we've both lost." Clara stared at him, this man who'd stumbled into her life bleeding and broken, who'd brought danger to her door and hope to her children's eyes. "I need time," she said finally. "Take all the time you need." Nate stepped closer. "I ain't going anywhere." The cabin door creaked. They both turned to find Josie standing there, Ruth in her arms, her expression unreadable. "Baby's hungry, Mama. I tried to settle her, but she won't take the bottle." Clara moved toward her daughter, grateful for the interruption. "I'll take her. Go on back to bed." But Josie didn't move. Her eyes went from Clara to Nate and back again. "What's going on out here?" "Nothing. Just talking." Didn't look like nothing. Clara took the baby from her daughter's arms. "Josephine, bed, now." Josie's jaw set in that stubborn way, but she turned and went back inside. Clara heard her footsteps on the loft ladder, then silence. "She doesn't trust me," Nate said. "She doesn't trust anyone." Clara held Ruth close, feeling the baby's warm weight against her chest. "Her daddy died. Her whole world fell apart. She's protecting herself the only way she knows how." "I understand that. I know you do." Clara looked at him one last time. "Good night, Nate." "Good night, Clara." She went inside, closing the door behind her, and didn't look back, but she felt his eyes on her anyway. And God help her, she didn't want him to stop looking. The writers came back 2 weeks later. Clara was hanging laundry when she saw the dust cloud on the horizon, not 3 men this time, but 5. And leading them a figure she didn't recognize. Older, better dressed, riding a horse that cost more than her entire homestead. "Sam," she called. "Get everyone inside, now." They moved fast, the drill familiar by now. Nate went to the root cellar without protest. He'd been practicing making the descent smoother each time. The children scattered to their positions. But when Clara opened the door, she knew immediately that this time was different. The man on the expensive horse dismounted slowly, removing his gloves with deliberate care. He was perhaps 60, silver-haired, with the bearing of a man who'd never been denied anything in his life. "Mrs. Weston, I presume." His voice was cultured, polished, wrong. "And you are—" "Victor Harlan." He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Clara didn't flinch. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Harlan." "Please, Mrs. Weston, don't insult my intelligence." Victor Harlan stepped closer, his polished boots crunching on the frozen ground. "Nathaniel Dawson was shot 2 miles from your property. His horse was found dead in your wheat field. My men visited you 2 weeks ago, and you lied to their faces." "I didn't lie. I said I hadn't seen a wounded stranger, and I hadn't." Clara's voice stayed steady. "I'd found him by then. He wasn't a stranger anymore." Harlan's smile widened. "Ah, honesty. How refreshing." Behind him, his men shifted. Brenner was among them, his scarred face twisted with satisfaction. "Where is he?" "Gone." "Gone where?" "Don't know. Don't care." Clara crossed her arms. "He healed up enough to ride and left 3 days ago. Said something about Laramie." "Laramie." Harlan turned the word over like he was tasting it. "And he just left, without paying his debt to the woman who saved his life." "Some men don't have honor, Mr. Harlan. I'm sure you know the type." Something flickered in Harlan's eyes. Anger, maybe, or respect. "Search the property," he said without turning around. "Now wait just a minute." "Mrs. Weston." Harlan raised a hand. "I admire your courage, truly, but I've been chasing Nathaniel Dawson for 6 years. I know him better than he knows himself, and I know he wouldn't leave a woman like you without saying goodbye." The men dismounted. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "You can't just—" "I can do whatever I want." Harlan's voice hardened. "I own the bank that holds your mortgage, Mrs. Weston. I own the sheriff who should be protecting you. I own every inch of this territory that matters." He stepped close enough that she could smell his cologne. "The only thing I don't own is Iron Creek Ranch, and I intend to correct that today." "Mama." Clara's blood went cold. Josie stood in the doorway, Ruth on her hip, her face pale but determined. "Get back inside, Josephine." "But Mama—" "Now." Josie didn't move. Her eyes went to Harlan, then to the men spreading out across the property, then back to her mother. "The cellar," she said quietly. "They're heading for the cellar." Clara's stomach dropped. "Well, well." Harlan smiled. "Thank you, young lady." He snapped his fingers. 2 of his men changed direction, heading for the cabin's side entrance. Clara moved without thinking. She grabbed the rifle leaning against the porch rail and leveled it at Harlan's chest. "Call them off." The yard went still. Harlan's men froze, hands hovering over their holsters. "Mrs. Weston." Harlan's voice was calm. Too calm. "Do you really want to do this in front of your children?" "I want you off my property." "And if I refuse?" Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. "Then we'll find out how good your men are." Silence stretched between them. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, could hear Ruth whimpering in Josie's arms, could hear the wind whistling through the gaps in the cabin walls. "Mama." Sam's voice came from somewhere behind her. "Mama, don't." "Stay back, Samuel. He's not worth it." Her son stepped into view, his young face pale but set. "Daddy wouldn't want you to kill for him." "This ain't about your daddy." "Yes, it is." Sam moved to stand beside her. "It's about all of us, about who we are, and we ain't killers." Clara's hands shook. The rifle suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "Listen to your boy, Mrs. Weston." Harlan's voice was soft, almost gentle. "He's got more sense than most grown men." The cellar door banged open. Everyone turned. Brenner emerged, dragging a figure behind him, Nate barely conscious, blood seeping through his bandages where they'd torn them. "Found him." Clara's rifle dropped. She couldn't breathe. "Nathaniel." Harlan walked toward his prey, his boots clicking on the frozen ground. "You look terrible." Nate lifted his head. Even beaten, even bleeding, his eyes burned with hatred. "Victor. 6 years." Harlan crouched in front of him. 6 years you've been a thorn in my side, refusing to sell, gathering evidence, turning the other ranchers against me. He shook his head. All for what? A dead woman who chose you over me. Don't you dare speak her name. Alice. Harlan said it deliberately. Alice Harlan she should have been. Would have been if you hadn't come along with your war medals and your pretty words. She never loved you. She never had the chance. Harlan stood. But it doesn't matter now. She's dead. You're about to be. And Iron Creek will finally be mine. You'll have to kill me first. That's rather the point. Clara found her voice. You can't just murder him in front of witnesses. Witnesses? Harlan turned one eyebrow raised. What witnesses? I see a struggling widow and her children, who will shortly be orphans if their mother doesn't learn to keep her mouth shut. The threat hung in the air, cold and clear. Leave them out of this. Nate's voice was ragged. They've got nothing to do with our fight. They made it their fight when they took you in. Harlan gestured to his men. Search the cabin. Take anything valuable. Then burn it. No. Clara lunged forward, but Brenner caught her arm, wrenching it behind her back. Mama! The children's voices rang out. Will Grace. Tommy, all of them screaming, as Harlan's men pushed past them into the cabin. Get your hands off her! Nate struggled against the men holding him. Clara. Such devotion. Harlan watched them both with amusement. Tell me, Mrs. Weston, did you really take him in out of Christian charity, or was there something more personal about your arrangement? Clara spat in his face. Harlan went still. Then he wiped the spittle from his cheek very slowly and backhanded her across the mouth. She tasted blood, heard Nate roaring, heard her children screaming. Mama! Josie thrust Ruth into Maddie's arms and flew at Harlan, her fists pounding against his chest. Leave her alone! Leave her alone! Harlan grabbed her wrist, twisting until she cried out. Such spirit! He held her struggling form easily. You know, I've been looking for a new housemaid. Something to replace the one Brenner broke last month. Perhaps you'd like the position? Let her go. Clara's voice shook with rage. She's 14 years old. Old enough. Harlan's smile made Clara's skin crawl. In this territory, girls marry at 14 all the time. Over my dead body. That can be arranged. Enough! The voice came from the direction of the road. Everyone turned. Riders. A dozen of them at least coming fast. And at their head, Sheriff Miller. Harlan's expression didn't change, but his grip on Josie loosened. What brings you all the way out here? The sheriff dismounted, his hand resting on his holstered gun. Behind him, Clara recognized faces, ranchers from the Valley, men who'd known Samuel, men who'd watched her struggle this past year. Got word you were paying a visit, Victor. Miller's voice was flat. Thought I'd come see for myself. This is private business. Burning a widow's homestead. Miller looked around at the chaos. The frightened children, the bleeding man, the men emerging from the cabin with armfuls of goods. Doesn't look private to me. The woman is harboring a fugitive. Nathaniel Dawson isn't a fugitive. He's a rancher who was shot on his own land by your men. Miller stepped forward. I've got 3 witnesses who saw the whole thing, Victor. The territorial marshal knows everything. Harlan's face went very still. You're bluffing. Am I? Miller gestured, and 2 of the ranchers dismounted, producing a leather satchel. Recognize these? The papers your boys took off Dawson when they shot him. They weren't very careful about disposing of evidence. Clara watched Harlan's mask crack. Just for a moment, a flash of fear of rage before he smoothed it over. Those papers don't prove anything. They prove enough. Miller took another step. Victor Harlan, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder, cattle theft, and conspiracy to defraud the territorial government. You can't arrest me. I own you. You owned me. Miller's voice hardened. But there are some things even I won't stomach. Threatening children, burning homesteads. That's where I draw the line. Harlan's men shifted uneasily. Brenner's hand moved toward his gun, but the ranchers behind Miller were faster, a dozen rifles raised, aimed ready. Don't be stupid, Colt, Miller said without looking. You're outgunned and outmanned. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Brenner's hand dropped to his side. Smart choice. Miller nodded to his deputies. Take them all in. We'll sort out the charges in Laramie. The next few minutes were chaos. Harlan's men were disarmed, bound, loaded onto horses. Harlan himself said nothing as they shackled his wrists. Just stared at Clara with an expression that promised this wasn't over. Then they were gone. Clara stood in her ransacked yard, blood still trickling from her split lip, watching the dust settle. Mama! Will's small voice broke the silence. Is it over? She knelt and pulled him close, feeling the others cluster around her. Grace, Tommy. Maddie with Ruth, Sam, standing tall, despite his shaking hands. Yeah, baby. Her voice cracked. It's over. Clara. She looked up. Nate had pushed himself to his feet, swaying but upright. His face was battered, his bandages soaked with fresh blood, but his eyes were looking at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. You're hurt, she said. So are you. I'll live. So will I. He limped toward her, each step clearly costing him. Thanks to you. Thanks to Sheriff Miller. Miller got here because of you. Nate stopped in front of her, close enough to touch. He told me you sent word to him the day after Harlan's men first came. Told him everything. Asked him to investigate. Clara felt her cheeks warm. I didn't know if he'd come. But you tried. You put yourself at risk, your children at risk for a stranger. You ain't a stranger anymore. Nate reached out his thumb, brushing gently across her split lip. She winced but didn't pull away. No, he said softly. I'm not. The children were watching. Clara could feel their eyes on her, curious, hopeful, scared. Mr. Dawson needs his bandages changed, she said, stepping back. Josie helped me get him inside. Mama. Now Josephine. They helped him to the cabin, laid him on the table like that first night. The children hovered, watching Clara work with the same focused intensity she'd shown before. But everything was different now. You should have told me, Nate said quietly as she cleaned his wounds. About contacting Miller. Would you have let me if I had... No. Then that's why I didn't tell you. He was quiet for a moment. You're a stubborn woman, Clara Weston. Been called worse. I'm starting to think it's a compliment. She met his eyes, held them. You saved my daughter. What? When Harlan grabbed Josie, you tried to get to her. Even bleeding, even half dead, you tried to protect my child. Of course I did. Why? The question hung between them. Nate looked at her for a long moment, then at the children gathered around the cabin, Will peering through the window, Maddie rocking Ruth, Sam standing guard at the door. Because they're yours, he said simply. And you're everything, Clara. You and these kids. You're what I forgot existed. Clara's hands stilled on his bandages. Nate. I know you need time. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. His hand found hers. But I'm done running from things that scare me. I've been running for 6 years and it almost got me killed. It almost got you killed. What are you saying? I'm saying. He took a breath. I'm saying that when I'm healed, I'm going back to Iron Creek. And I'm asking you again, come with me. You and all 7 of your children. Nate? Not as charity, not as debt, as family. The word hit Clara like a physical blow. Family, she repeated. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I also know. His voice cracked. I know that when Harlan threatened you, I wanted to tear him apart with my bare hands. I know that your children have started to feel like mine. I know that every morning I wake up in this cabin, I don't want to be anywhere else. Tears burned Clara's eyes. She blinked them back. I can't promise anything. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for a chance. Mama. Josie's voice came from the doorway. Clara turned to find her daughter standing there, Ruth asleep in her arms. Can I talk to you outside? Clara looked at Nate, then followed Josie onto the porch. The other children had gathered there too, all 6 of them, even Tommy, who usually ran from difficult conversations. What is it? Josie looked at her siblings. Some silent communication passed between them. We talked, Josie said. While you were inside, about what Mr. Dawson said. You were listening. We're always listening, Mama. A ghost of a smile crossed Josie's face. This cabin ain't exactly private. Clara felt her cheeks warm. And, we want you to say yes. Clara stared at her daughter. What? We want you to say yes, Sam repeated, stepping forward. To going with him. To Iron Creek. Children. Hear us out, Mama. Josie's voice was steady. I know I've been hard on him. I didn't trust him when he came. Didn't want him here. But, she swallowed. But he's not trying to replace Daddy. He told me that. The day you went to town for supplies we talked. He said Daddy sounded like a good man, Will piped up. Said he wished he could have known him. He taught me how to whittle, Tommy added shyly. Like Daddy used to. Clara's throat tightened. We're gonna lose this place, Mama. Maddie's voice was quiet but firm. The bank's coming. We all know it. And when they take the house, where are we gonna go? I'll figure something out. You always say that. Josie's eyes were wet. And you always do. But Mama, you shouldn't have to do it alone. Daddy wouldn't want you to do it alone. Your father loved you. Josie stepped forward, taking Clara's hands. He loved you so much, it hurt to watch sometimes. And he'd want you to be happy. He'd want us to be safe. She squeezed. Mr. Dawson can give us that, if you let him. Clara looked at her children, all 7 of them, from 14-year-old Josie down to baby Ruth, sleeping in her sister's arms. They were thin and worn and carrying burdens no child should carry. But they were looking at her with hope. Real hope. The kind she hadn't seen since the day they buried their father. He wants to adopt you, she heard herself say. All of you. Make you legally his. We know. Sam's voice cracked. He told us. He asked our permission. Will grinned. Said he wouldn't do it unless we said yes. And we said yes, Mama. Grace's small voice piped up. We said yes. Clara couldn't speak. The tears she'd been holding back finally fell. Josie pulled her close, and then they were all there, all 7 of her children wrapped around her, holding her up when her legs wanted to give out. Go tell him, Mama, Josie whispered. Go tell him yes. Clara pulled back, wiped her eyes, looked at her children one more time. Then she walked back into the cabin. Nate was still on the table watching the door. When she came in, he tried to push himself up. Clara. Hush. She moved to his side. The children and I talked. And she looked at this man, this wounded, broken, hopeful man who'd stumbled into her life, and somehow become essential to it. And I'm done being scared too. His breath caught. Clara, I ain't promising forever. I ain't promising easy, but I'm promising to try. She took his hand. We'll come with you, me and the children. We'll come to Iron Creek. Nate's eyes filled with tears. He pulled her down, wrapping his arms around her despite the pain it must have cost him. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. Thank you. The cabin door burst open. All 7 children tumbled in, unable to wait any longer. Did she say yes? Will demanded. She said yes. Nate's voice was hoarse with emotion. She said yes. The children erupted into cheers. They piled onto the table surrounding Clara and Nate, a tangle of arms and legs and happy tears. Does this mean I can have my own horse? Will asked. William, Clara and Josie said together. But Nate laughed a real laugh, full and warm and alive. Yeah, son, he said. Yeah, you can have your own horse. That night, with the children asleep in the loft and the fire burning low, Clara sat beside Nate's makeshift bed. His fever was down, his wounds clean, his breathing steady. When did you talk to them? She asked quietly. About adoption. The day before Harlan came, while you were at the well. Nate's hand found hers in the darkness. I wanted them to know I wasn't trying to steal their mother. I was trying to join their family. You should have told me. They asked me not to. Said they wanted to think about it first. Make sure they all agreed. Clara shook her head. My children keeping secrets. They learned from the best. She almost smiled. Almost. Nate, I need you to understand something. Anything. Samuel was my first love. He gave me 7 children and 10 years of happiness. I'll never stop loving him. I would never ask you to. Let me finish. Clara's voice trembled. I'll never stop loving him. But I've learned something these past weeks. The heart doesn't run out of room. It just makes more. Nate was quiet for a long moment. Alice used to say something like that, he said finally. She said love wasn't a candle that gets smaller when you light another one. It's a fire that grows bigger. She sounds wise. She was. You would have liked her. Maybe. Clara leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. But I think she'd want you to be happy too. I think so too. They stayed like that for a long time, breathing together in the darkness. 2 broken people finding their way towards something whole. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen prairie. But inside, the little cabin, something warm had begun to grow. Something that felt against all odds, like hope. 3 weeks later, Nate could finally ride without Clara worrying he'd fall off his horse. The Iron Creek men had come for him the day after Harlan's arrest. 15 loyal ranch hands, who'd been searching every homestead between Laramie and Medicine Bow. They'd brought fresh horses' supplies and news that made Nate's jaw tighten. Harlan's lawyers are already working on bail, his foreman Jake reported. Judge in Laramie owes him favors. How long? Maybe a month. Maybe less. Nate had looked at Clara then, and she'd seen the calculation in his eyes. We need to move faster, he'd said. Now they were loading the last of their possessions into the wagon Jake had brought. It wasn't much. Clara was surprised how little a family of 8 could accumulate when poverty stripped everything to essentials. This everything? Sam asked, tying down a bundle of quilts. That's everything. Clara took one last look at the cabin. At the door, Samuel had built the window he'd installed so she could watch the children play the porch where he'd proposed to her on a summer evening that felt like another lifetime. Mama. Josie touched her arm. You okay? Yeah. Clara blinked hard. Just saying goodbye? We can come back. Visit sometimes. No, baby. When we leave, we leave. Clara turned away from the cabin. Your daddy's buried here, but his memory's coming with us. That's what matters. They'd visited the grave that morning. all 9 of them standing in the frozen ground behind the cabin. Nate had hung back, giving them space, but Clara had called him forward. "He should meet you," she'd said. "Proper-like." Nate had removed his hat, standing at the foot of Samuel Weston's grave with his head bowed. "Sir, I don't know if you can hear me," he'd said quietly. "But I want you to know I ain't trying to take your place. Nobody could do that. I'm going to try to take care of them the way you would have, the way they deserve." Will had slipped his hand into Nate's then, small fingers curling around larger ones. "Daddy would have liked you," the boy said seriously. "He always liked people who kept their promises." Now they were leaving. Clara climbed onto the wagon seat, Ruth bundled in her arms. Josie sat beside her, the younger children arranged in the back among their belongings. Sam rode alongside on one of the horses Jake had brought. He'd been practicing all week, determined to arrive at Iron Creek, looking like a proper rancher's son. "Ready?" Nate brought his horse alongside the wagon. Clara looked back one more time at the cabin, at the grave marker, just visible on the hill, at the life she was leaving behind. Ready. The journey to Iron Creek took 3 days. They traveled slow, mindful of the children and the cold. Nate's men rode in formation around them, Jake at the front, the others flanking the wagon like they were guarding royalty. "Is this really necessary?" Clara asked the first night, watching the men set up a proper camp with military precision. "Harlan's got friends everywhere." Nate's voice was tight. "Until he's locked away for good, we take no chances." "You think he'd come after us? Even now?" "I think Victor Harlan has never let anything stop him from getting what he wants." Nate met her eyes. "And right now what he wants is revenge." Clara pulled Ruth closer, suddenly cold despite the fire. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in the wagon, listening to the wind and the distant howl of coyotes, thinking about what she was doing. Taking her children to a stranger's ranch, trusting a man she'd known less than 2 months, leaving everything familiar for a future she couldn't predict. "Can't sleep either?" Nate's voice came from beside the wagon. Clara pushed aside the canvas flap to find him sitting on a rock nearby, wrapped in a blanket. "Shouldn't you be resting your wounds?" "Are fine. Doc Miller checked them before we left." He patted the rock beside him. "Come sit with me, unless you're scared of the dark." "I ain't scared of nothing." Liar. She climbed down, careful not to wake Ruth, who was sleeping in Josie's arms. The cold hit her immediately, but she settled beside Nate anyway, letting him drape part of his blanket over her shoulders. "What are you scared of?" he asked quietly. "Getting there. Not fitting in." She paused. "Your people accepting us. They'll love you." "You don't know that." "I do." His arm came around her, pulling her closer. "They've watched me grieve for 6 years. Watched me turn into a ghost walking through my own house. When I told Jake I was bringing a family home," his voice cracked. He cried Clara. A 50-year-old ranch hand with hands like leather cried like a baby. "Why?" "Because they've been praying for something to bring me back to life, and then you came along and did it." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't do anything special." "You saved my life." "Anyone would have—" "No." Nate turned her face toward him. "Not anyone. Most people would have turned away a bleeding stranger, would have protected themselves and their children. But you didn't. You dragged me into your home, fed me your last food, lied to dangerous men to keep me safe." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "You're extraordinary, Clara Weston. The sooner you accept that, the happier we'll both be." She wanted to argue, wanted to list all the ways she was ordinary, unremarkable, just a tired widow trying to survive. But the way he was looking at her made the words stick in her throat. "Nate, yeah, what if I can't love you the way you deserve?" The question had been burning in her chest for days. She'd finally said it out loud. Nate was quiet for so long she thought she'd ruined everything. Then he laughed, a soft, surprised sound. Clara, I'm not asking you to love me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Then what are you asking? I'm asking you to let me try. He pulled her closer. Let me earn your trust. Let me show you what I can be for you and those children. And if love comes? He shrugged. Then I'll count myself the luckiest man alive. If it doesn't, well, at least I'll know I tried. That's not fair to you. Let me decide what's fair to me. She looked at him. Really looked the way she hadn't let herself since that first morning when she'd found him bleeding in her wheat field. You're a good man, Nate Dawson. I'm trying to be. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Now go get some sleep. We've got a long ride tomorrow. She went, but she didn't sleep, not for a long time. She lay in the wagon listening to the night sounds, feeling something warm and unfamiliar blooming in her chest. It felt, she realized with a start, like hope. Iron Creek Ranch appeared on the third day, like something out of a dream. Clara had expected big. Nate had said big. But nothing had prepared her for this. The sprawling main house with its wide porch. The massive barn, the bunkhouses and stables and outbuildings spreading across the valley like a small town. Holy! Sam caught himself just in time. I mean, wow! Language, Clara said automatically, but her heart wasn't in it. She was too busy staring. Welcome to Iron Creek. Nate's voice held something she hadn't heard before. Pride, yes, but also vulnerability, like he was showing her something precious and hoping she wouldn't laugh. It's beautiful, Josie breathed. It's huge, Will corrected. How many horses live here? About 40 right now. We raise them mostly. Sell to the army, to other ranchers. Nate guided his horse closer to the wagon. There's a pond out back that freezes solid in winter. Good for skating. And a creek that runs through the property, best fishing in the territory, or so I'm told. Can we fish? Tommy's small voice piped up. Daddy used to take us fishing. Anytime you want, son. The words slipped out easily, naturally. Clara watched Nate's face, saw the flicker of emotion he tried to hide. Tommy didn't seem to notice. He just grinned, the first real grin Clara had seen from him since Samuel died. The welcome they received was overwhelming. Every ranch hand, cook, and stable boy had lined up to greet them. Men removed their hats. Women curtsied. A gray-haired woman who introduced herself as Martha, the head housekeeper, burst into tears when she saw the children. "Oh, Mr. Dawson," she kept saying. "Oh, bless you, bless you." Martha's been with the ranch since before I was born, Nate explained quietly to Clara. She's been after me to remarry for years. Remarry, Clara's voice came out sharper than she intended. Nate went still. I mean, that is, I wasn't suggesting. He's been lonely. Martha appeared at Clara's elbow, beaming. So lonely it broke our hearts. And now look, a whole family. It's a miracle, that's what it is. Martha. Nate's face had gone red. Don't you Martha me Nathaniel Dawson. I've known you since you were in short pants. The housekeeper turned to Clara, her eyes shrewd but kind. He's a good man, Mrs. Weston. Stubborn as a mule, and twice as proud, but good. You could do worse. Martha. Clara couldn't help it. She laughed a real laugh, the kind that came from deep in her belly, and surprised her with its warmth. I'll keep that in mind, Martha. Thank you. The housekeeper patted her arm, then turned to the children who were staring at the house like they'd never seen anything so grand. Now then, who's hungry? I've got fresh bread and butter in the kitchen, and I believe there might be some apple pie left over from yesterday. Pie? Will's eyes went round. Real apple pie. Real as rain, young man. Come on, all of you. Let's get you fed. The children followed her like ducklings after a mother duck. Even Josie, who'd been maintaining her suspicious distance, couldn't resist the promise of fresh food. Clara started to follow, but Nate caught her hand. There's something I need to show you first. He led her around the side of the house, past the kitchen garden dormant now in winter, and up a small hill. At the top stood a single cottonwood tree, bare branches reaching toward the gray sky. Beneath it, 2 headstones. Clara understood before he spoke. "Alice and the baby," she said quietly. Nate nodded. He stood before the graves with his hat in his hands, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. "I come here most mornings. Talk to her about the ranch, the men, what's happening in town." His voice was rough. I wanted her to meet you." Clara's throat tightened. "Nate, I know it might seem strange, bringing you here before you've even seen the house, but I needed—" He stopped struggling for words. "I needed her to know that I'm not forgetting, that I'll always love her, but that I'm ready to make room for something new." Clara stepped forward, slipping her hand into his. "Tell me about her." So he did. He told her about how Alice laughed loud and unladylike, the kind of laugh that made strangers turn and smile. About how she'd once punched a man who tried to cheat them on a cattle deal. About her terrible singing voice, and her worse cooking, and her absolute conviction that Nate was destined for greatness. "She believed in me when no one else did," he said. "When I came back from the war broken and angry, she saw something worth saving. She rebuilt me, Clara. Piece by piece." "She sounds remarkable." She was. Nate turned to face her. "And so are you. Different ways, but equally remarkable. I don't want you to ever think you're competing with her memory. There's no competition. You're both miracles, just different kinds." Clara looked at the headstones, at the carved names, the dates, the simple inscription that read, "Beloved wife and mother." "I'd like to bring flowers," she said. "In the spring. Would that be all right?" Nate's breath caught. "You'd do that. She's part of your family. Your family is becoming mine." Clara squeezed his hand. "That means she's part of mine too." Nate pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against the cold wind. She felt his shoulders shake, felt the dampness of tears against her hair. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." They stood there for a long time, 2 broken people finding something whole in each other's arms, while Alice's spirit watched from somewhere beyond the gray winter sky. The first week at Iron Creek was chaos. The children ran wild, exploring every building, befriending every animal, pestering every ranch hand with endless questions. Will had adopted a barn cat that followed him everywhere. Grace had discovered the piano in the parlor and was teaching herself to play badly but with enthusiasm. Tommy spent hours in the stable, learning to brush horses from a patient old hand named Miguel. Even Josie was thawing. Clara found her one afternoon in the library, an actual library, with shelves of books reaching to the ceiling, running her fingers over the spines with something like reverence. "You like to read." Nate appeared in the doorway, watching her with gentle eyes. Josie startled, then composed herself. "We had 3 books back home. The Bible, a farming almanac, and a collection of poetry Mama's mother left her. Now you have hundreds." Nate crossed to the shelves, pulling down a volume. "This was Alice's favorite, Jane Eyre. Have you read it?" Josie shook her head, taking the book carefully. "It's about a woman who refuses to give up no matter what life throws at her." Nate smiled. "Reminded me of your mother, and now of you." Josie's suspicious mask cracked just for a moment. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson." "Nate, please." Or, he hesitated. "Whatever you're comfortable with. There's no pressure." That night at dinner, served in an actual dining room at an actual table with chairs for everyone, Josie spoke up unexpectedly. "Mr. Nate?" She stumbled over the name. Would you teach me about the ranch, the business side, I mean? The books and the planning and all that?" Clara looked at her daughter in surprise. So did Nate. "You want to learn ranch management? Mama always said women should know how to take care of themselves." Josie lifted her chin. "I figure that includes knowing how money works." Nate's face broke into a slow smile. I figure it does too. We'll start tomorrow. Clara felt something shift in her chest, another piece of the wall around her heart crumbling away. But not everything was easy. Sam struggled with his new role. At the homestead, he'd been the man of the house, responsible and essential. Here, surrounded by actual ranch hands doing actual work, he seemed lost. Clara found him behind the barn one evening, kicking at frozen clods of dirt, with more force than necessary. Want to talk about it? No. Too bad. Talk anyway. Sam kept kicking. I'm useless here. That's not true. Yes, it is. He finally looked at her, and she saw the tears he was fighting. Back home I mattered. I helped. Here I'm just a kid. You are a kid, Samuel. That's not a bad thing. It feels bad. His voice cracked. Daddy said I was the man of the house. He made me promise to take care of you and the little ones. But now what? Now there's someone else to do it. Sam's hands clenched. I ain't mad at Mr. Dawson. He's been good to us. But I don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore. Clara pulled her son close, feeling the tension in his young body. You're supposed to be 12 years old, she said quietly. You're supposed to make mistakes and learn things, and not have the weight of the world on your shoulders. She pulled back, meeting his eyes. Your daddy asked too much of you, baby. He didn't mean to. He didn't know he was dying, but he did. And I let you carry that burden because I was too broken to carry it myself. Mama, let me finish. Clara cupped his face in her hands. You did everything your daddy asked and more. You took care of us when we had nothing. You were brave and strong and good. But you don't have to be the man of the house anymore. You can just be Samuel. You can just be my son. The tears Sam had been fighting finally fell. He collapsed against Clara, sobbing the way he hadn't since the day they buried his father. She held him until the sobs subsided, stroking his hair like she'd done when he was small. Nate wants to teach you ranching, she said eventually. Real ranching, not just survival. He says you've got good instincts. He said that. He did. Said you remind him of himself at your age. Clara smiled. Maybe you could let him teach you things, share what he knows. It won't replace what your daddy taught you. It'll just add to it. Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, Mama, I'll try. That's all I'm asking. 2 weeks into their stay, the telegram came. Nate read it at the breakfast table, his face going pale. Clara watched him, her heart sinking. What is it? Harlan made bail. Nate's voice was flat. He's out. And according to the marshal, he's been making threats. What kind of threats? Nate didn't answer. He handed her the telegram. Clara read it twice, her hands shaking. He's coming here. He's coming here. Nate stood already moving. Jake, get the men together. We need to... Wait. Clara caught his arm. We need to think about this. There's nothing to think about. He's threatened my family. I'm going to... Our family. Clara's voice was quiet but firm. And going after him with guns blazing is exactly what he wants. He's trying to provoke you. Don't give him the satisfaction. Nate stared at her, breathing hard. Then what do you suggest? The law didn't work before. But Harlan's men took those papers. The evidence. Clara's mind was racing. What if there's more? Other ranchers he's threatened, other people he's hurt. If we could gather enough witnesses. The territorial marshal is already involved. But you said Harlan owns judges, owns lawmen. Clara leaned forward. What he doesn't own is public opinion. What if everyone he's ever wronged stood up at once? Too many voices to silence. Nate was quiet, considering. It could work, he said slowly. There's a Ranchers Association meeting next week in Cheyenne. Half the territory will be there. Then that's where we make our stand. Clara met his eyes. Together. Something passed between them, not just agreement, but recognition. Partnership. The thing Nate had promised back at the homestead. Together, he echoed. And despite everything, despite the danger and the fear and the uncertainty, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt ready. The Cheyenne Grand Hotel was packed with ranchers from every corner of the territory. Clara stood at the back of the meeting hall, her heart hammering. Beside her, Nate was rigid with tension, his hand resting on the small of her back, like he needed to touch her to stay grounded. "There's more people than I expected," she whispered. Word got out. Nate's jaw was tight. About Harlan. About what we're planning. Is that good or bad? We're about to find out. The association president, a heavy-set man named Crawford, banged his gavel for order. The crowd settled chairs, scraping voices fading to murmurs. "Before we begin regular business," Crawford announced, "I understand we have a special matter to address. Mr. Dawson." Nate stepped forward. Clara watched him walk to the front of the room. Watched the way the crowd parted for him, some with respect, others with suspicion. "Gentlemen," Nate's voice carried clear and strong. "Most of you know me, know my ranch, know I've never been one for politics or public speaking." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. "But I'm here today because there's a cancer in this territory. A man who's been buying up land through intimidation, violence, and murder." Nate paused. "Victor Harlan." The room went silent. "That's a serious accusation, Dawson." A voice from the middle of the crowd. Clara recognized him. Harlan's lawyer, a weasel-faced man named Prescott. "It's a serious crime." Nate didn't flinch. 6 years ago, Harlan tried to force me off my land. When I refused to sell, his men cut my water rights, poisoned my cattle, and when that didn't work, his voice hardened. They shot me, left me for dead. You have no proof. I have witnesses. Nate turned toward the door. "Mrs. Weston." Clara's legs felt like water, but she moved forward anyway. Every eye in the room followed her. "This woman found me bleeding in her wheat field," Nate continued. "She saved my life at great risk to herself and her 7 children. And when Harlan's men came looking for me, she lied to protect me." A widow's word against one of the territory's most prominent citizens. Prescott's voice dripped with contempt. "Surely you can do better than that." "I can." Nate nodded toward the door again. "Mr. Patterson." An older man stepped forward, rangy, weathered, with the look of someone who'd spent his life fighting the land for survival. "I'm Tom Patterson. Harlan bought my ranch 2 years ago." His voice shook with anger. "Bought it after his men burned my barn with my horses inside. Insurance wouldn't pay, said it was an accident. But I saw them. I saw them light the match." Another man stepped forward, then another, and another. "My brother disappeared after he refused to sell," one said. "Found his body in a ravine 3 months later. Sheriff called it an accident. Harlan's men beat my foreman near to death, said it was a warning. He bought up the water rights upstream, then charged us triple to use our own creek." One by one they came. Ranchers, farmers, townspeople, all with stories of intimidation, violence, threats. Clara watched the room transform, watched suspicion turn to anger, watched the tide begin to turn. Prescott was sweating now. "This is hearsay, unsubstantiated. Then substantiate this." A new voice. Everyone turned. Sheriff Miller stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 federal marshals. In his hand, he held a thick sheaf of papers. "What is the meaning of this?" Prescott demanded. "These are bank records, Mr. Prescott." Miller walked forward, his boots echoing in the silent room. "Records showing payments from Victor Harlan to various territorial judges, sheriffs, and politicians. Records showing fraudulent land transfers. Records showing..." He paused for effect. Payments to 3 men, currently serving time for the murder of Alice Dawson. The room erupted. Clara grabbed Nate's arm as he swayed. His face had gone white. "What did you say?" His voice was barely audible. "I said we have evidence linking Victor Harlan to your wife's death, Mr. Dawson." Miller's expression was grim but satisfied. "It wasn't fever that killed her. It was poison, and we can prove he ordered it." Nate's legs buckled. Clara caught him holding him upright as the world crashed down around them both. "He killed her." Nate's voice was hollow. "He killed Alice. And he's going to pay for it." Miller turned to the crowd. "Federal marshals have already arrested Harlan at his ranch. He won't be making bail this time." The cheering started somewhere in the back and spread through the room like wildfire. Men were shaking hands, slapping backs, crying with relief. But Clara only had eyes for Nate. "Come on," she said softly, guiding him toward the door. "Let's get you out of here." They found a quiet corner in the hotel lobby. Nate sat with his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. 6 years, he kept saying. 6 years I thought it was my fault. That if I'd been there, it wasn't your fault. Clara knelt in front of him, taking his hands. "None of it was ever your fault. He poisoned her, Clara. He poisoned my wife because she chose me over him." Nate looked up, and the devastation in his eyes broke her heart. "What kind of monster does that?" "The kind who's going to rot in prison for the rest of his life." Clara gripped his hands tighter. "He took Alice from you. Don't let him take anything else." Nate stared at her. Slowly the devastation gave way to something else. Grief, yes, but also release. The weight of 6 years of guilt lifting from his shoulders. "She didn't die because I wasn't there. No. I couldn't have saved her. No." Clara's voice was fierce. "But you can honor her. By living. By being happy. By building the life she wanted for you." Nate pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I love you," he whispered. "God help me, Clara. I love you." Her heart stopped, then started again racing. "Nate, you don't have to say it back. I know it's too soon. I just—" His voice broke. "I needed you to know. After everything I needed you to know." Clara pulled back, looked into his eyes, those blue eyes that had looked at her with such hope from the moment he'd woken in her cabin. "I love you too." The words came out before she could stop them. And the moment they did, she realized they were true. "You do?" Nate's voice was raw with hope. "I do." Clara laughed, a wet surprise sound. "Lord help me, I do." He kissed her then, right there in the hotel lobby with people streaming past and the world changing around them. And Clara kissed him back. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Clara sat in the courtroom every day, watching as witness after witness testified against Victor Harlan. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, letters, confessions from his men in exchange for lighter sentences. But it was the testimony about Alice that broke him. The doctor who'd initially diagnosed fever took the stand. His hands trembling as he admitted that Harlan had paid him to falsify the death certificate. The servant who'd seen Harlan's man slipped something into Alice's tea. The midwife who'd noticed the strange symptoms and been threatened into silence. Nate sat rigid through all of it, his hand gripping Clara's so hard she thought her bones might break. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, including the murder of Alice Dawson and her unborn child, Harlan's mask finally cracked. "You think this is over?" He turned to Nate as the marshals led him away. "You think you've won? I'll get out. I'll find you. I'll make you watch while I—" "That's enough." The judge banged his gavel. "Get him out of here." But Harlan wasn't finished. His eyes found Clara in the crowd. "You," he spat. "You ruined everything. A worthless widow with a pack of brats. I'll see you all in—" The marshals dragged him out before he could finish. The courtroom erupted in applause. Clara sat very still, her heart pounding. Nate turned to her, his face a mixture of triumph and concern. "He can't hurt you. He'll never hurt anyone again." "I know." Clara took a breath. "But I think I need some air." She fled the courtroom, pushing through the crowd, not stopping until she reached the street outside. The cold hit her like a slap, clearing her head. "Mama." She turned. Josie stood behind her, her face worried. "I saw you leave. Are you okay?" Clara leaned against the building, suddenly exhausted. "I'm fine, baby. Just a lot to take in." Josie moved closer, hesitant. "He's really going to prison for good." "For good. He'll never hurt anyone again." Josie was quiet for a moment. Then slowly she reached out and took Clara's hand. "I was wrong about Mr. Dawson." Clara looked at her daughter in surprise. "What?" "When he first came, I was so angry." Josie's voice was thick. "Angry at him for needing help. Angry at you for giving it. Angry at Daddy for dying and leaving us." She blinked hard. "But I was wrong." "Josie." "He loves you, Mama. Really loves you. I can see it in the way he looks at you, the way he talks about you." Josie met her mother's eyes. "And you love him too, don't you?" Clara felt tears threatening. "Yes, baby, I do." "Then marry him." Josie's voice cracked. "Marry him and be happy. You deserve to be happy." Clara pulled her daughter close, feeling the sobs shake Josie's thin frame. "I thought you'd hate me," Josie whispered, "for being so awful to him." "I could never hate you. Never. I was so scared, Mama. Scared of losing you like we lost Daddy. Scared that if you loved someone else, there wouldn't be room for us anymore." "There's always room for you." Clara pulled back, cupping Josie's face. "All 7 of you. Nothing changes that. Not Nate, not marriage, not anything. You're my heart, Josephine. You and your brothers and sisters. Everything else is just extra." Josie laughed through her tears. "Good extra. The best extra." They stood there for a long moment, mother and daughter, healing something that had been broken since the day they buried Samuel Weston. "Mama." "Yes, baby. I think I'm ready to call him Papa." Clara's breath caught. "You are. Not to replace Daddy. Never to replace Daddy." Josie's chin lifted. "But Daddy's gone. And Mr. Daw and Nate is here. He loves us. Takes care of us. Isn't that what a papa does?" "That's exactly what a papa does." "Then that's what I'll call him." Josie paused. "If he's okay with it." "I think he'll be more than okay with it." Clara smiled through her tears. "I think you might just make him the happiest man in Wyoming." The adoption hearing was held 2 weeks after Harlan's conviction. All 7 children stood before the judge, scrubbed and dressed in their finest clothes. Martha had outdone herself, making sure each one looked respectable enough for the territorial courthouse. "Mr. Dawson." The judge peered over his spectacles. "You understand the gravity of what you're asking. These children will legally become your heirs. Your responsibility, your family." "I do, Your Honor." Nate's voice was steady. "And there's nothing I want more." "Mrs. Weston, you consent to this arrangement." Clara stepped forward, her hand finding Nate's. "I do. These children deserve a father, and Nate Dawson has proven himself worthy of that title 10 times over." The judge turned to the children. "And you, all of you, consent to being adopted by Mr. Dawson?" "Yes, sir." Sam spoke first, his voice strong. "Yes, sir." Josie followed. One by one the others echoed them. Maddie's quiet, yes, Will's enthusiastic one, Grace's shy whisper, Tommy's solemn nod. Even baby Ruth in Martha's arms at the back of the courtroom seemed to coo her approval. "Well then." The judge almost smiled. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I hereby grant this petition for adoption. Nathaniel Dawson is now the legal father of Samuel Josephine Matilda William Grace Thomas and Ruth Weston. He paused. Or should I say Dawson? Weston Dawson. Nate spoke up. If it please the court, Your Honor, we'd like them to keep their father's name alongside mine. The judge's eyebrows rose. That's unusual. Their father was a good man. He deserves to be remembered. The judge looked at Clara. Something softened in his stern face. So ordered. The children will henceforth be known as Weston Dawson. He banged his gavel. Congratulations to your new family. The courtroom erupted. The children swarmed Nate, nearly knocking him over with their enthusiasm. Papa! Will shouted. You're officially our papa. Officially. Nate's voice cracked as he tried to hug all 7 of them at once. Officially yours. Clara stood back watching her children. Their children now celebrate with the man who'd stumbled into their lives bleeding and broken and somehow become everything they needed. Nate looked up, his eyes finding hers over the chaos of small bodies. Marry me, he mouthed. Already said yes, she mouthed back. I mean now, today. Her heart stopped. The judge is right here. Nate continued, stepping toward her. The children are here. Everyone we care about is here. He took her hands. Why wait? Because, Clara's mind raced. Because I don't have a dress. Because we haven't. Do you love me? Yes. Do you want to spend your life with me? Yes, but... Then marry me. Right now. Right here. Nate's eyes were bright with tears. Life's too short, Clara. We both know that better than most. I don't want to waste another day not being your husband. Clara looked at her children, all of them watching with wide eyes and hopeful faces. Mama, Josie said softly. Say yes. Say yes, Mama. Will bounced on his toes. Say yes. One by one the other children joined in. A chorus of little voices pleading for the happy ending they'd all earned. Clara turned back to Nate. This man who'd changed everything. Who'd given them hope when they had none. Who'd loved her children as his own before the law ever made it official. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Right now. The judge was already rising from his bench, a genuine smile breaking across his weathered face. Well then, he said. Seems I've got one more ceremony to perform today. Everyone gather round. It wasn't the wedding Clara had imagined. No white dress, no flowers, no church with stained glass windows. Just a courthouse in Cheyenne with 7 children serving as witnesses and a judge who kept having to pause because someone was crying. Usually Will, who insisted he wasn't crying, he just had dust in his eyes. But when Nate slipped Samuel's ring onto Clara's finger, the same ring he'd been holding onto since she'd given it to him that night in the cabin, she knew it was perfect. I now pronounce you man and wife. The judge beamed at them. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Dawson. Nate kissed her soft and sweet with promise instead of passion, while their children cheered around them. Hello, Mrs. Dawson, he whispered against her lips. Hello, Mr. Dawson. Clara smiled. Ready to go home? I've been ready since the moment I woke up in your cabin. They left the courthouse as a family, 2 parents, 7 children, and a future that stretched out before them like the Wyoming sky. 1 year later, Clara stood in the kitchen of Iron Creek Ranch watching spring unfold through the window. The house had changed in the months since they'd arrived. Children's drawings hung on the walls. Toys scattered the hallways. Laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for 6 years. Mama, Will's voice carried from outside. Papa says to come see the new foal. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and headed for the door. In the paddock, Nate stood surrounded by children, all 7 of them, plus the 3 Anderson kids from the neighboring ranch who'd become permanent fixtures at Iron Creek. Look at her, Mama. Grace's eyes were huge. She's so tiny. She's beautiful. Clara moved to stand beside Nate, feeling his arm slip around her waist. Does she have a name yet? We were thinking Hope, Sam said, because that's what she represents. New beginnings and all that. Clara looked at her son, 14, now tall and strong with his father's determination and Nate's quiet confidence. He'd grown so much this past year. They all had. Josie had thrown herself into learning ranch management, spending hours with Nate going over books and breeding records. She'd announced last month that she intended to run Iron Creek someday, and no one had doubted her for a second. Maddie had found her calling with the animals, developing an almost magical ability to calm even the most skittish horse. Miguel called her his best apprentice. Will had become Nate's shadow, following him everywhere, absorbing everything. He still asked too many questions. But now they were good questions. Questions about ranching, about leadership, about being a man. Grace had blossomed at school, making friends for the first time in her life. Tommy had finally stopped having nightmares. And Ruth, their baby. Ruth had taken her first steps just last week, toddling toward Nate with arms outstretched, calling him Papa as clearly as any of the others. You're thinking deep thoughts. Nate's voice was soft in her ear. Just remembering. Remembering what? The morning I found you. Clara leaned into his warmth. I was burying our last chicken, wondering how I was going to feed 7 hungry children, and then you showed up bleeding in my wheat field. Best thing that ever happened to me getting shot. Clara laughed. That's a terrible thing to say. It's true, though. Nate turned her to face him, his hands warm on her shoulders. If Harlan's men hadn't shot me, I never would have ended up on your property. Never would have met you. Never would have... He gestured at the children at the ranch, at the life they'd built. Never would have had any of this. God works in mysterious ways. He certainly does. They watched the children fuss over the new foal, their voices blending into a happy chaos that had become the soundtrack of Clara's life. I have something to tell you, she said quietly. Nate went still. Good something or bad something? Good, I think. Clara took a breath. I'm pregnant. The silence stretched for 1 heartbeat, 2. Then Nate let out a whoop that startled the horses and sent the children running toward them. What happened? Sam demanded. Is everything okay? Everything's perfect. Nate grabbed Clara and spun her around, laughing. Everything's absolutely perfect. Papa, what? Josie's eyes went wide. Mama, are you... Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. You're going to have a baby brother or sister. The children's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. Will declared he wanted a brother. Grace insisted on a sister. Tommy just wanted to know if the baby would be big enough to play with soon. Josie hung back watching. Clara moved toward her, suddenly uncertain. Is this okay? Josie's face crumpled, and then she was in Clara's arms, hugging her tight. I'm so happy for you, Mama, she whispered. So happy for all of us. That evening, after the children were finally asleep, Clara and Nate sat on the porch swing watching the stars come out. Scared? He asked. Terrified. Clara's hand rested on her still flat stomach. I'm not as young as I was. You're perfect. I'm 35 years old with 7 children and a ranch to help run. Like I said. Nate pulled her closer. Perfect. They swung in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch horses shifting in the barn cattle, lowing in the distance, the creek murmuring its endless song. I talked to Alice today, Nate said suddenly. Clara looked up at him. You did? Told her about the baby, about how happy I am. He paused. Thanked her for leading me to you. You really believe she did? I believe something did. Call it God, call it fate, call it a dead woman looking out for the man she loved. Nate's voice was thick. I almost died in your wheat field, Clara. By all rights I should have, but I didn't, and every day since then has been a gift. Clara reached up, touching his face. You're a good man, Nathaniel Dawson. I'm trying to be. He kissed her palm. You make it easy." The baby arrived in October, squalling and red-faced, and absolutely perfect. They named him Samuel for the father Clara's children would never forget, for the man who'd built the foundation that Nate was building upon. "Samuel Nathaniel Weston Dawson," Clara whispered, holding her newborn son. "That's a lot of name for such a tiny person. He'll grow into it." Nate sat beside her on the bed, his finger tracing the baby's tiny hand. "Look at him, Clara. Look at what we made." The children crowded around, each taking turns meeting their new brother. Will declared him acceptable, though he'd hoped for someone big enough to play with immediately. Grace proclaimed him the most beautiful baby in the whole world. Tommy asked if they could keep him. But it was Josie who surprised them all. "Can I hold him?" Clara placed the baby carefully in her oldest daughter's arms. Josie looked down at the tiny face, and something shifted in her expression. The last remnants of the angry, grieving girl she'd been when Nate first arrived, finally falling away. "Hi, Samuel," she whispered. "I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything. How to read and ride and run a ranch." She looked up at Clara and Nate, her eyes bright with tears. "And I'm going to tell you about your grandfathers. Both of them. So you never forget where you came from." Clara felt Nate's hand find hers. Felt the squeeze of his fingers, the warmth of his love, the solidity of the family they'd built from loss and hope and stubborn determination. Outside, the morning sun was rising over Iron Creek Ranch, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and pink and promise. A year ago, Clara had been a starving widow with 7 hungry mouths to feed, burying her last chicken in the frozen ground. Now she was a wife, a mother of 8, a partner in one of the territory's most successful ranches, surrounded by children who'd learned that love could grow from grief, that family could be chosen as well as born, that hope could bloom in the darkest winter if you were brave enough to plant it. She'd saved a dying stranger because it was the right thing to do. He'd saved her right back. And together, they'd built something neither of them had dared to dream alone, a family forged in hardship, tested by fire, and held together by a love strong enough to outlast any storm. Clara Weston Dawson looked at her husband, her children, her newborn son, and smiled. This was what redemption looked like. This was what second chances could become. This was home.